All right. So hi, KK. It's great to meet you and great to have you on. Thank you for joining us for this Q&A session. And we're super excited to learn more about your perspectives on blockchain, especially with a focus on sustainability.
Thanks, Nate. Pleasure being here.
Awesome. Well, before we kind of dive into the nitty-gritty of a Q&A, can you just give us a little bit of a run through about yourself and your background?
Certainly. So right now, I am the founder CEO of Krish Energy, which is based out of Colorado. And Krish basically does audits and certifications for environmentally conscious hospitality businesses. I do have some fantastic support from the University of Colorado Springs over here, and that's where my focus is right now. Before doing what I'm doing right now, I do have hands-on experience in manufacturing. I used to work at a manufacturing plant in Ohio, so I loved that until everything moved out in America. I worked in the energy field. I was involved in some federal panels on grid modernization in North America about a decade ago. I worked with a power utility in Colorado Springs, and I also did some teaching. So I did teach some additive manufacturing here in Colorado Springs as well. So yeah, I got like a wide range of backgrounds, but one of the key thread that ties all of that together is focus on sustainability, because even whether I was in manufacturing, I was looking at environmentally benign manufacturing, energy. Of course, you want to look at stuff that's sustainable, and now in hospitality, I'm looking at moving the hospitality industry in a sustainable direction.
Awesome, that's great. And by the way, I know if you would like to share anything on your screen, you do have sharing capabilities now. But that's great. Thank you for sharing that with us. So kind of diving into the questions, the first one that we were curious about is, what do you see as a few of the main differences between sustainability and carbon neutrality? And what are the real world implications of those differences?
That is a fantastic question to start off with, Nate. So I think I'm going to use the screen share to talk a little bit on that. Let me first pull up my screen. So this is okay. This is my company website, krishenergy.com. One of the things I think a good way to brainstorm some of these, I came up on this article recently that said the World Health Organization actually released some new air quality guidelines, and that showed almost all of India is polluted. Now, why am I bringing this up? Let me scroll down a little bit, and then I think, and this is from India Today, one of the most highly reputed journalistic news organizations in India. So if you think about this, it says the organization has revised air quality for 6 pollutants. And what are the pollutants? Particulate matter, which is PM. There is nitrogen oxide, sulfur oxide, carbon monoxide. So this is what they include. So these are what they constitute as pollutants for the air in India. And based on that metric, they said almost the whole of India can be considered as a polluted place. Why is that different? Is because a lot of people consider carbon as the same. Oh, well, that was a surprise. Well, a lot of people would consider carbon emissions or the greenhouse gas emissions as the same as these air pollutants. They are not. The key difference is, if you think about greenhouse gas emissions, the idea there is they're gonna trap the heat from the sun, and they're gonna warm up the climate, and that's gonna cause a lot of drastic changes in the climate. That's what the perception is. Now, here's the thing: the global scientific community could have reached some sort of consensus that yes, anthropogenic carbon emissions or greenhouse gas emissions are causing a lot of this climate changes, and we need to do something about it. But you have to understand the difference between air and water pollutants, other environmental issues that we have, whether it's putting plastic in the ocean and killing all the fishes there. So these are all the things that are very different from carbon emissions. So if you look at this, this is basically a landfill over there. Now, if you talk to someone that's concerned just about the climate, they would worry about what are the greenhouse gas emissions coming from this? Because there is a lot of methane coming from landfills, which is a greenhouse, which creates greenhouse gas effect. That's a concern. From a sustainability perspective, you would have to think about, hey, how toxic is the land? Is this landfill and other metrics too? Just think about the smell toxicating the water, maybe the air pollutant, which can cause other health effects. These are all things that come under sustainability, not under a climate risk mitigation strategy.
Awesome. That's a super comprehensive answer. So thank you for that. It was really
Absolutely.
insightful.
In fact, let me do this. I'm just going to dive in just a little bit more. Now, I mentioned about Krish and what my company does. Now, I'll tell you how I'm different from a lot of the other green initiatives out there, and how, again, to drive down the point on there's a difference between shooting for carbon neutrality versus shooting for sustainability, right? If you look at my screen right now, Krish, our Krish Energy, we actually draw our sustainability thinking from something called the Brundtland Commission. The Brundtland Commission over here, it was a commission created under the commission created actually back in the 80s, and they came up with a report which was called the World Commission on Environmental Development and Our Common Future. What they said was, hey, sustainability broadly, they defined it as saying it's our ability to meet our current needs, meaning a high quality of life for as many people as possible, without inhibiting the future generations' ability to meet their own needs. That's how they broadly defined it. Now, if you look at this is what this is a proprietary Krish developed scoring metric for sustainability. I could go in deep, but just to give you a material use, how we are using materials for our quality of life is a very, very, very big factor for our sustainability rating. Natural habitat and water conservation is part of it, energy is part of it, but you have to look at it holistically. What most people would look at is they would probably just look at one dimension and say, there is a big risk, there is an imminent threat from carbon, anthropogenic carbon emission create climate change. That is going to change the natural habitat. It's going to, create extreme weather. That's something that we need to address. However, being obsessed with that, you cannot neglect the material use. You cannot neglect some of the other factors that go into sustainability as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a super comprehensive visualization. It is pretty interesting, actually. Is that specific to hospitality or business as a whole, the Pentagon?
Well, I'll say this. It's a startup company, and if I could just introduce some of my board members right now. These are folks that I work with right now. We are still in pre-funding stage. So the reason I'm telling you this is that's why I focus specifically on hospitality. However, if I'm talking to an investor, I will say the opportunity, even the sky is not the limit, because you can adapt our metrics to any industry and then say, hey, we are coming up with a benchmark for sustainability in a very unique way, and then give consumers the clear signal on what's sustainable and what's not. So it could be a manufacturing product, it could be any service out there, but I'm just starting with hospitality.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, I guess then shifting that sustainability conversation over to the applications of blockchain. Many people view sustainability and energy consumption as two of the largest issues that threaten the future of blockchain technology, for example, with Bitcoin and its high consumption of energy. What do you think are some of the largest challenges that blockchain faces in regards to sustainability? And then what are the solutions for those issues?
Good question. And I want to see if I'm able to directly pull this up. I did put together some publication on, the impacts of, I'm able to just do this without, okay, perfect. So this was an article I put together that looks at the environmental impacts of, some of the some of what tech industry is super excited about, looking at the phones, looking at the blockchain and something like the electric vehicles as well. And I do have some background in investigating electric vehicles. And this was, I do want to highlight that this was originally published over here. It was published in 2018. So it's 3 years. And a lot of the folks are today waking up on the environmental challenges that blockchain presents. And I did this 3 years ago, where there was very few that actually did. Now, what I'm scrolling down towards is there were a few that actually looked at the transaction energy consumption for the blockchain. Now, this is just an example out of the Bitcoin stuff, and I'm sure you and most people listening to this would understand Bitcoin is not blockchain. It uses blockchain. It's one of the applications for it. But if you think about the energy consumption for, and this is, a single Bitcoin transaction compared to like a single transaction from Visa, the World Economic Forum estimated that it's going to be 20,000 times that. Digicom estimated that much. IEEE was conservative, but it's still, you're talking thousands of times the energy consumption. And if I have to scroll through now, again, putting this in perspective, Visa processes about, over 100 billion transactions, and that was in 2017. And that's the same amount as 100,000 American households for an entire year. I mean, that's how much energy they used. So if you look at Bitcoin, and I went with 20,000, which is actually the Rocky Mountain Institute estimate. So I didn't pick the 100,000, and I didn't pick the lowest one. I went with 20,000. You're looking at the energy consumption that would be equivalent to 2 billion US households for an entire year, right? That's, again, this was something that I did 3 years ago, and I published this, and you could see some of the references and all this. That's intense. That's super intense. Something needs to be done. And my personal opinion is, firstly, you cannot ignore this stat. You can argue about it. You can still say, well, there's still other benefits. We're going to get better in the future and all this stuff. But, burying this or ignoring this is not the right approach. The reason I say that is, again, maybe that comes to the second portion of it. The Rocky Mountain Institute, RMI itself, was pushing for something called a light blockchain or something like that. And they claimed that was, a lot more efficient in terms of its energy consumption. I think if you can highlight the energy consumption and the issues with it, you can incentivize innovations to come up with a more efficient solution. So the first part is you have to put it out there. And the number may be different from what I estimated, but it is still very high. There needs to be public awareness on that side of things.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that answer. It's very insightful. Awesome. Well, sticking with kind of a similar topic, it seems like the world is waking up to the importance of user privacy and data security. Do you think that the safety benefits of a blockchain-based distributed storage solution outweigh the energy costs that it takes to provide for that? And then how would we continue to improve on this trade-off?
Well, I'll say this. I'm not the best expert on blockchain itself or distributed computing itself. However, I will say this. I am someone that spent significant time in looking at what I call cyber diseases, meaning, privacy is an issue, social manipulation on clickbait platforms, all these, and especially the issue of the lack of traceability on some of these things. I've written articles about, the ad fraud, people that can just create bots and generate the ads. The reason I'm saying all this is if blockchain can present a solution that could improve the traceability so we can reduce some of the fraud going on, that would be fantastic. But we have to look at the whole solution in terms of saying, okay, what's the energy it's consuming? Could it be consumed? For me, the important part is not just that it's consuming a lot of energy, if you're consuming, you build a new nuclear plant in a safe way and you use that for some of this, it's fine. But if you're using dirty coal in India and China, because those two countries are predominantly run by dirty coal. Now, the reason why I want to emphasize the word dirty coal is they do not have, at least I can, having looked at Indian energy sector, I can tell you Indian coal power plants do not have the emission controls that you would find in America or Western Europe. So it's very dirty. So if you're putting up a lot of this, whether you're using just data servers in general, or you're using some of this other technologies, but you're using in regions that consume the worst possible energy source, that's just bad. It's just bad. So these be brought to the forefront. Forefront. And my issue is you can't just treat anyone that raises a concern as the enemy. I want the best solutions to win out. Especially if it's benefits the society, brings us closer, and all that stuff. But you need healthy skepticism within the discussion. You just need to have that. So you can't just say, "Oh, if you're raising concerns, you're bad." That's just a bad attitude.
Absolutely, and that's a very insightful perspective, and that actually happens to be our last question. So thank you so much for sharing your perspectives with us on the various facets of blockchain and sustainability. Do you have any other further closing thoughts?
Actually, I do. Let me do this. And I was thinking while put together this conference and invited me. Let me drive home one point on. Okay, let me give you. This is like my company deck. Let's see. Give you an example of. So if you see this, my company is working on projects with University of Colorado Springs, all right? And I'm specifically looking at food waste. If you think about, and this is one of the key things that we look at, especially from a materials management perspective. Why I'm showing you this is, this is actually, if you look at the students over here with me in there, some of the students are mechanical and aerospace engineering department from that department at University of Colorado. They're working on a biodigester that takes food waste from restaurants and produces energy from it. Okay. Why am I saying this is, I would argue that a food waste fed biodigester is more sustainable than a solar panel. Okay. Think about what I just said, or let's just say it could be more sustainable, because if you think about just carbon emission as the metric, a lot of people would say nothing beats solar or wind, it's free, it's natural source. But you're saying, and it doesn't use any carbon emissions. So think about, but if I use food waste, I'm actually taking the food waste off of the landfill. So I'm actually, reducing land usage, reducing the emissions, the other toxic emissions that could be coming out from it too. So the key there was you have to use a different, if I'm using, sustainability metric versus just a greenhouse gas emission metric, you could get different results. You could say, man, solar, yeah, it is fine, but doing food waste, using food waste as a source for energy could be better. So that's just an example I wanted to put out there in terms of explaining the broader sustainability versus carbon neutrality stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really interesting to hear about. Thanks for sharing that.
Wonderful. All right, I guess that's what I have right now. But I see something in the chat. Let me stop the screen share.
Should be good. It's just someone signing off, I think.
Okay.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining, and it was really insightful to hear your thoughts on sustainability, and it was great meeting you.
Absolutely. All right.